Hello there everyone, what's going on? If you don't know me yet, my name is Marcelo Vieira, and as I know you like this video, I ask you, why don't you hit the like button? Click also the bell to receive information about new videos and subscribe to this channel. It's all free, okay? So today I wanted to talk about something new. A few years ago I launched a course that until today is my course with more students called WordPress Theme Development from Scratch. It is a course focused on creating WordPress themes for those who are, of course, web developers. This course was and still is very successful precisely because it covers the main topics in the world of theme creation. It has everything from how to install WordPress to creating custom loops, a theme customizer. It teaches how to make the theme ready to be translated. It talks about all the template files, explains step by step how they work. In short, dozens of classes with everything about the subject. But the thing is that it was getting kind of outdated. That's normal because in this industry, everything evolves too fast. And when it comes to WordPress, things move pretty fast. And I'm also learning new things, of course, so several students have been asking me to update the classes and stuff. But I did much better than that. I decided to record the course all over again from scratch. I removed some subjects that were not that important and added other things that now make the course fantastic. So I'm inviting everyone to enroll in this new version. In this video, you will see the first lessons of the new course, and you can enroll using the special discount coupon that is down below in the video description. And I invite even those who had already enrolled in the course, have already completed the course and received a certificate to retake the lessons. If you have already watched the course in the old version, you will not receive a new certificate, of course, but in return, you will learn things that you've never seen before. It will be well worth it. And for those who have already finished the course, by the way, an important detail, they can even do it again without having to pay. In this new version, I decided to leave behind all the third-party tools used in the previous course. So even for the course to stay updated, we will not use any plugins in the theme we will create. Also, we will no longer depend on frameworks like Bootstrap. Another thing that I stopped using was XAMPP as my local server manager. In this course, I work with two new possibilities, which are local for those who have less experience with web development. Recently, I even saw people from the WordPress team themselves using local, so it's a great solution here for our project. And there's also Docker for those who have a little more knowledge in the area. Docker is a new trend, everybody's talking about it, and I decided to teach you how to manage a WordPress installation inside it. It is worth it for those who are curious and know a little bit more about web development. But the course is for everyone. You just need to know a little bit of PHP, HTML, CSS, and you're good to go. By the way, if you wonder if what you know of PHP is enough to follow a course like this, I have a video here on my channel that I'll leave on the card above. At the moment, there are almost 70 classes. I divided the content basically into two groups, two parts. The first with 6 sections or modules. In them, we will create the theme from scratch all the way to the end when you have in your hands the whole theme working. We start by installing WordPress. We'll talk about the development environment for the course project. Then we'll talk about the basics of theme creation, template hierarchy, enqueuing scripts and style sheets, menu creation, how the WordPress loop works, both the standard loop and the custom loop, the different types of theme support, widget areas. Then we'll show how to create the inner content of the theme using permalinks. We'll talk about all the main template files. We'll talk about different types of pagination. We'll talk about template parts. I will bring a subject that I had only talked about here on my YouTube channel, which is conditional tags. And we finish this part of the course talking about the theme customizer, a tool that allows you to customize almost any area of the theme, making it very flexible so that your website user can control many features without knowing how to code. We'll also talk about how to make your theme ready to be translated and about security in WordPress themes. And of course, we'll also learn how to upload the site from the local server to a live server. And the second group, the second part of the course, at the end, which is going to be a bonus section where I'll talk about some complementary subjects with things that will help you a lot to understand a little bit more about the world of theme creation and also introduce some trends around the subject. We'll talk about page builders, about child themes, about Docker, and especially about Gutenberg, the block editor, and things that are new as I record this video, like block-based themes, the theme.json file, etc. The goal is for you to start making the transition between themes that are now called classic themes and block themes. Just for you to get a taste of it, I will bring the first lessons for you to follow, starting now. Hey guys, so let's get this course started. The first thing we need to get started is, of course, a new WordPress installation, preferably one that we can install, set up, and work with on your own computer. That is, a local installation of WordPress. For some time in my courses, I have separated this task into two steps. First, I would teach how to install a local server so that the student would have access to all the tools needed to manage the development environment, such as an application to handle the databases, the server itself, usually Apache, and PHP. This is essential to run our tests in a risk-free environment. I mean, if we make any mistake in a local development environment, that's okay. It is made for this very purpose, for testing. Then, in a second moment, that's when I would teach how to install WordPress. For a long time, I used and encouraged the use of ready-to-use solutions containing all these tools: the database manager, the Apache server, the PHP libraries, and the one I used the most was XAMPP. All my students know that, but nowadays I don't think it's worth to keep using tools like XAMPP. I don't think they are bad, but a real pain when using them is that it is often too difficult to make changes to the environment settings in order to test different scenarios when you need. I started to leave XAMPP aside when I needed to test a project of one of my clients in two different PHP versions, which is kind of hard to do using XAMPP. It was then I started to test other alternatives, and before we install WordPress for real, I have to tell you a little bit about them. We're going to install one of these applications so that we can start using WordPress. The first one is Docker. In a nutshell, Docker is a platform for creating applications that work with a concept called container. And containers are like isolated environments in which you can develop and test using any kind of technology. So for example, you can create a separate environment to develop a WordPress theme or a WordPress plugin, and in this isolated environment, you have everything you need: WordPress itself, the Apache server or Nginx, MySQL, PHP, some auxiliary applications like PHPMyAdmin, for example, and you can work with any version you want just by making a minimal change in a file with the YML or YAML extension and then bring up or start the containers again. It's wonderful, but I decided not to start this course here showing how Docker works because it might be too complex for some students, because we have from high-level students to beginners who still have very little ability with code. That's why I will only talk about the subject at the end of the course, in a bonus section, in an optional lesson, okay? I repeat, the lesson is optional, okay? For those of you who are interested in understanding how to build a WordPress development environment with Docker and Docker Compose, please take a look at the bonus section and then come back here for the next lesson in this course. But only watch it if you think you have enough technical knowledge to follow the explanation, because I repeat, it is not a subject for beginners. Okay then, well, there are other alternatives like Bitnami, one of the applications that also allows you to install WordPress and other applications in a very quick and easy way. But the problem is, depending on your operating system, it is a bit complicated to install more than one instance of WordPress on the same computer. You can also install WordPress from the command line using wp-cli. But the alternative that I prefer and that I think is the most suitable for everyone taking this course here is an application called Local. As the name suggests, it's an application that helps you install WordPress locally. It is totally free and works the same way on any operating system. That alone is a big advantage. Local was developed by the team of two companies, Flywheel and WP Engine, and both of which offer hosting services for WordPress websites. As you will see, it is a very easy to use application that offers a lot of tools that make WordPress development easier and all for free. The package already comes with everything we need to run WordPress. By the way, it's a good idea to talk about some details. WordPress is a system basically built with PHP. So to run it, you need a specific environment. What applications like Local or Xampp or Bitnami or Docker itself do is emulate the environment of a hosting server on your computer. For this to work, you need all the little pieces of the puzzle. The web server itself, which can be Apache or Nginx, the PHP language, and MySQL to manage the database that WordPress will need to store the site's content. That's what we're going to do. So here we go. First, go to Local's website at localwp.com. Click on Download. Choose your operating system. You will need at least enter your email address. Click Get It Now. Save to your computer. From here on, the installation steps depend on your operating system, okay? Well, I already have Local installed, so I will just open up the application. If you're opening it for the first time, you see that it will ask you to create an account. You can create an account or not. Okay, now is the easiest part, creating our first WordPress site on our machine. This will be the installation we will use to create the theme, okay? I click here below on this button, or you can go here in File, Add New Site. Let's give it a name, for example, WP Devs. Here under Advanced Options, I can set some options like the local domain of your site. Check this out, the location on your computer where the site files will be stored. And this option here allows you to create a new site from a blueprint. In other words, from a copy of an existing local site, which can save you a lot of time. Moving on. Here I can choose how my development environment will be set up. I can choose a default configuration. Here I have PHP 7.4.1, Nginx web server, and MySQL 8.0.16. You might see different information depending on when you're watching this video. You can choose this default configuration or you can customize it as well. For example, I'm going to choose PHP 8.0. Look, at the time I'm recording this video, WordPress is not 100% compatible with PHP 8.0 yet, okay? But I'm gonna choose it anyway because for our theme, which is gonna be pretty simple, PHP 8.0 will work just fine. Anyway, as you see later on, it's very easy to switch the PHP version if something goes wrong. This is one of the coolest features of this application. For the web server, I'll go ahead and choose Apache. And MySQL in the latest version available here. I'll choose a username for my WordPress installation, a password. Since it's a local installation, I'll choose a very weak password, but remember to change this password when you upload the site to a live hosting server, okay? Here you can choose your email or accept the default email. When you are done, click Add Site. Let's wait a little while. That's it. if everything went well, you should have a WordPress installation ready to go. Here in this tab, you have an overview of the installation. The local domain. Look at that. This is a domain with SSL already integrated, okay? Information about the server, about the PHP version. Check it out. As I said before, you can change here both the PHP version and the web server version. This option down here allows you to log into admin without having to enter the username and the password. This will be on the WordPress version, and our site is not multi-site. Here under database, it's worth mentioning that you can access your database using the adminer application. For those who are used to PHPMyAdmin, it's quite similar except it has fewer options. But you can perform at least the basic actions important for this course, such as viewing and modifying some fields of the tables, exporting the database, running some basic SQL queries, etc. At the end of the course, we'll be coming back here, by the way, to export the database after all our work is ready to go live. Closing here. Later on, if you guys want, you can explore the other options. For example, here under Tools, Live Links, if you log in here, there is an option that allows you or someone else to access your site remotely. This is nice to say, let your client see how the site you're creating will look like. You can also test sending emails locally. Here you can connect the site you're creating with your WP Engine account or Flywheel if you have one. And here you have a bunch of cool extensions for your development environment. For example, one that I think is sensational is this one, Instant Reload. With it, you can open the site and see the CSS changes without having to reload the page. And that's it. Let's go back here to the main page. And here I can open the WordPress admin and the front end. Let's go to the admin. Check it out. By default, you see that under Appearance, Themes, WordPress comes with some native themes installed. Their names is always related to the year when the theme was created. So for instance, 2022, 2020, 2021. In this course, we're gonna learn how to stop relying on these native WordPress themes. We'll see how you can create your own theme and customize it throughout the course. Got it? So this is not gonna be just a course that will teach you how to create any simple website. We're gonna take the first step here to create something more comprehensible, that is a WordPress theme. Knowing how to create a theme with a little more experience, you can even sell this theme. But of course, along all the lessons, you'll also see here and there many explanations related to the WordPress site as a whole, not just the theme. With time, you realize that the theme is independent from the site and can even become a separate product that can even generate an income if done the right way. This course will teach you the most complicated part, which is to create the theme the right way. So that's what I had for you in this lesson. I hope you have learned something new today. Just a reminder, if your installation didn't go well, you can of course send me a question. It will be my pleasure to try to help you. But what I really recommend is that you take a look at the local's own help page, which I will leave among the extra material for this lesson. Oh, and before I finish, an important reminder, never uninstall the application without first making an export of the sites you create, okay? To do this, just right-click on the name of the site and choose Export, right? I will come back next time and we'll start to understand how a WordPress theme works from the inside. See you then. Hello, welcome back. So before we start getting our hands dirty, I wanted to talk to you about some aspects of this course. The classes you watch, the tools you see me using throughout the course, etc. First of all, one question I'm always asked. Marcelo, which IDE do you use? Can I use any IDE or code editor? Of course you can. Go with the one you feel more comfortable with, okay? I myself for a long time I've used only Sublime Text 3, but since the end of 2020 I decided to migrate to VS Code. And I don't know why in this world I took so long to start using VS Code because it is really awesome. So this is the IDE I will use here in the course, okay? If you have it around, you can use it. If you don't have it, I recommend you to install it, okay? But you can use whatever IDE you want. Just to get started, what I would do is go over here to local, click here, and that will open up my project folder on my machine. For every new installation of WordPress, you see that a new directory will be added here in the local sites folder. The WordPress files will stay here in the app public folder. I'm going to take this public folder and drag it here into VS Code. That's it. And what extensions do I use in my VS Code? So before you ask me which extension does this or that, just take a look at my little list of extensions here. If you're interested, if you see some cool feature being used here in the course and want to use it too, just come back here to this video and check it out. I'm not gonna give you support about the extensions I use in the IDE, alright? So if you have any questions about the use of any of them, just do a little search on Google, okay? The only extension here that I really think is essential is this one, the PHP IntelliSense. These extensions give you much faster access to the WordPress core to, for example, see what parameters a function can take, what is the return type of these functions, and so on and so forth. Let me give you an example here. Let's just wait for it to finish indexing the files. So just hover the mouse over the function name to see a list of parameters. If you press Ctrl or Command on a Mac, while you hover the mouse over the function name, you can go straight to it. And here you can see more details. In this course, I will leave almost no reference links to WordPress functions because you can do that using VS Code. So one more reason for you to install this IDE to work with WordPress. Another thing the extension does is it gives you hints about the function's signature as you code. Check it out. This makes the developer's life a lot easier. See? Very useful here, right? Another hint, you can also find all the documentation about WordPress functions on the developer reference page. So I will leave the link in the extra material for this class. But I recommend that you bookmark this page in your browser because you can use it a lot. As I said, I'm not going to provide the link to the docs for all the functions that we are going to use here in the course. So you can find them all by doing a quick search on this page, right? Still talking about documentation, I would like to make one thing very clear here in this class. Most of the code that I will write in the course will not be documented, okay? What I mean by this is that I'm not going to stop the video just to add comments in my code, okay? So what I recommend is that you study and document the code snippets yourself so you don't forget what they do. I know and I understand very well the importance of writing documentation, but as the project I will show you will not leave this course, it will not be available elsewhere, I will not make a point of documenting anything, alright? Now, if your intention is to redistribute your theme, you need to document it very well, okay? I will leave a link in the extra material for you to find out more. A very nice VS Code extension that can help you do that, if you're interested, is the PHP Doc Blocker. This one I'm showing here. Some more tips to finish. Always write your code with the WordPress debug mode on, okay? This will help you see clearer error messages on the screen while you develop. To do this, you can go to the wp-config.php file. This little guy here. In this case, I don't have this constant defined here, but it's very easy. I just add it like this. It is vital that you always develop in WordPress using debug mode on, okay? If you want to go deeper, local also allows you to very easily install Xdebug in your project using VS Code. Just open the local extensions page. You see this extension here. And then just follow the instructions and start using it. For our project, I'm not gonna leave it enabled, okay? Still talking about debugging, there are some plugins that they help you develop themes, and I will talk about some of them here. We'll be installing some of them during the course, and some others will not be installed. The first one is called Debug Bar. It's a very complete plugin which also has several add-ons that you can use to debug code, analyze the execution of filters, action hooks, queries. It also has an integrated console. It is very, very versatile. There is this show current template, which shows the template files being loaded on a page and also some additional files loaded. And then there is this one, Query Monitor, which shows all the queries being executed on a given page. All of these tools will help you create code for your themes much better and much faster. But another thing that helps a lot is to check how other themes are built and how they work. Since they are all open source, you can even copy some code snippets from them if it makes sense for your theme. We will even do it a few times during the course. Alright then folks, thanks for sticking around. I hope you enjoyed the material. See you next video. Hello everyone, welcome to another lesson. So in this lesson, we're going to talk about the anatomy of a WordPress theme. We'll understand how a WordPress theme is made up, what files, directories, and what are the rules that you have to follow, and other subjects as well. To begin this lesson, I will be showing you how the directory structure of a WordPress theme looks like. So we have 3 folders at the root of the installation. This one, WP admin, WP content, and WP includes. We also have several other files that are used to configure WordPress itself, such as the wp-config.php file, about which we also discussed in the previous lesson. Our theme is inside the WP content folder, where we also have the plugins folder and other important folders that make the WordPress site work. Our theme will stay here in the themes folder. If you open up this folder, we'll see that WordPress already comes with at least 3 themes pre-installed, whose names are related to the year in which they were produced. The last one here would be 2022. There's also 2021 and 2020. 2022 is a slightly different theme from the others because it is a theme created entirely with blocks. This was introduced in WordPress 5.9 as part of a larger project called Gutenberg, whose ultimate goal is to make themes fully editable by the end user. In this course, I will not talk about this subject, about block themes, partially because it is still a very new thing and a lot is still gonna change. Another reason is that this new way of making themes doesn't mean by any means that the way we have been creating themes until now will change overnight, okay? For a long time to come, these two methods will coexist. So you can be sure that everything I will teach you in this course will be valid for many years to come. Now, the other 2 themes follow the most common way of creating themes. Let's expand 2021 here, for example. We will see that there is another folder structure. We have here an assets folder for CSS, JS, images, Sass, some folders to include multiple functions, a folder for template parts. We'll see what is in the next lessons, and other files here that make our theme work. And I think you may be wondering, but Marcelo, there are so many files and so many folders. Do I need to create all of these files and all of these folders if I want a custom WordPress theme? Well, not exactly. In fact, in theory, a WordPress theme that really works only needs two files, the index.php and the style.css file. To be more exact, there are two more, which are comments.php and screenshot.png. But the theme can work without the last two, okay? But calm down, we'll better understand how these files work during our course. We are just at the beginning. But just to be clear, since the beginning, index.php is the entry point to our theme, and style.css is responsible for telling WordPress what is the name of the theme, the author of the theme, the description of the theme, but we'll see all of that in the next lessons. Of course, if you build a theme with just these two files, it will be too simple, and we don't want that. Let's imagine that you want the content of a contact page, which shows up when you click on the menu link corresponding to it. We want that page to be different from the content of your home page. If your theme has only the index.php file, your contact page will be identical to the home page. Surely that's not what we want, is it? Of course not. That's why we have these other files here. Each one of them will specialize in a part of the WordPress site. For example, the single.php file will help us create the single view of a single post. On the other hand, the page.php file is used to open a static page, which is different from a post, which WordPress understands as having, say, a more dynamic content than a static page. And there are yet several other files that we'll get to know during the course. Another important file is this one called screenshot.png. This file is just a cropped image of our theme that represents the theme when we are within the admin. So here in the admin, if we head over to Appearance and click on Themes, we see that for every theme there is an image. And those images come from a file called screenshot.png. One interesting thing that you'll notice is that theme files such as index.php already serve as study material. Here we have the index.php file of the 2021 theme open. In the file itself, you already have a description of what it is. As you see here, it says that it's the main template file, the main theme file, the entry point of a WordPress site. Just to make things a little more explicit, since I will use this word several times in the course, a template is nothing more than a mold or a model. So template files are models that determine how a content should be presented on a given page. As the course goes on, you'll understand this better. So back to index.php. It is one of the files required for you to build a theme, the other one being the style.css as I explained to you previously. For each of the native WordPress theme files, you have this kind of documentation. In fact, this is part of the themes documentation. It's a good practice if you start creating your files this way, especially if you want to make that theme available for download. However, we'll not do that because time is short for this course. Let's go ahead and choose another file. For example, page.php. The documentation for this one should be saying that it is the template for displaying all pages. But I think someone made a mistake when copying this from another theme. And here it's saying that it's for displaying all single posts. But this is wrong, okay? It's meant to display pages, not posts. By the way, for those who still don't know the difference, the example of a page or a static page is the sample page that comes with the WordPress installation. Let me go over here to admin. This page here, okay? Everything that you create here under pages, add new, everything here will be a static page, okay? Back here to the code. The single.php, now this is correct, okay? It's a template for displaying all single posts, the posts that you create in your WordPress, okay? But what happens when you visit, for example, a post or static WordPress page? What happens when we visit one of those contents is that a mechanism that WordPress calls the theme hierarchy comes into action. To explain how this works, I'm going to use this image here that was created by the WP Tuts Plus website. It has been around for a long time, but it's still very useful for explaining this subject. It explains very well, in my view, how this mechanism works. In addition, it also explains to us how the anatomy of a WordPress theme is. This is, say, an anatomical model of a WordPress theme. Look, in this anatomical model and also hierarchical, the main part will always be the index.php file. This file, later you can open the same file from any of the themes, okay, is a simple PHP file that has a page layout template within it with header, the middle part, and footer. As I explained earlier, it is the main theme file. It will always be used to show the content of a page in situations where we don't need any specific template or when WordPress doesn't know which page template to use. Later, you understand this in practice. This file is what we call a fallback. Now, if at any point we need to present a page with a specific look to the site visitor, we will no longer use the index.php template. At that point, we're going to go down a bit in the hierarchy and use another page template, which is inside another file. Let's give an example. And that's one thing that happens all the time within WordPress. Say a visitor enters your site through a misspelled web address. In these situations, most sites show a page known as a 404 page to the visitor, which is a classic error page. If your theme has a file called 404.php, you can create a totally different look for that file. But if your theme doesn't have a file called 404.php, WordPress will follow the theme's hierarchy and show the contents of the index.php file instead. I mean, WordPress will be using the fallback file. Got it? So WordPress works more or less like this. Did you get an error? Well, then I have to see if the theme has a 404 PHP file. I will check what's inside it and then display the page according to what it is specifying. Oh, but this theme doesn't have this file. Okay, so I will have to use the index.php file instead. Got it? We can apply the same reasoning model to the other files. For example, the single.php file is the file for viewing single posts. If your theme has this file, and I always recommend you to have one, every time you click a link in a post, you view the page according to the design of the single.php file, following all the HTML tags and PHP functions inside that file. I think this must have become clear. If not, you have many more chances to understand it during the course with more practical examples. Now, talking about the theme's anatomy, about the pieces that compose the theme visually, considering this image as the anatomical template of a WordPress theme, we could say that these files about which I just spoke, index.php, page.php, single.php, and other files, they will be loaded here in the middle of the page. They will be part of what we call the WordPress loop. And each template file like index.php, page.php, single.php, each one of them have their own loop inside them. That is always a while loop, but we'll be explaining it better in other videos. In addition to the loop region, which is here in the middle of the page for this diagram, but you can move it to any other area of the site according to your design, we have two structures that repeat on all pages and are generated by two files. So up here, the content that comes from the header.php file, and here below, the content of the footer.php. Optionally, our site can also have what is called a sidebar. And that's what makes the WordPress theme beautiful. It can be very dynamic with all these possibilities. That is, you can even create a theme using the index.php file only, but WordPress gives you all the tools to make this theme much richer, much beautiful. We can see all of this in the theme layout that we'll be building in the course. From the top, where we see the logo, the search box, to the menu area will go our header. The contents of this entire area is coming from the header.php file. The dynamic part, in which we will have the template files and their loops, will extend from this region here, which is commonly called a hero in web design, to the end of this list of posts. So we're going to include all of the dynamic content of the website, the content that is not static, in this big area here. And to complete the design, we'll have our footer at the end, whose content will come from a template part called footer.php. Also, for some pages, we'll also have a sidebar, as I told you in the first lessons when I first showed you guys the theme in action. But not now. You'll see all that in our next lesson, okay? I promise you that in the next lesson, we'll stop theory and we'll begin practicing a lot, okay? So, see you guys in my next video. Hey guys! In the last lesson, we talked about the two basic files for creating a WordPress theme, index.php and style.css. In today's lesson, finally, we're going to start creating themes. In the next two lessons, you'll be able to create your first theme ever. Just imagine that. You'll be able to access the WordPress dashboard, see your theme there, and activate it. That sounds great, doesn't it? So let's get started. The first thing we're gonna do is create the folder structure of the theme. So in here we have the WP content folder, then the themes folder, where the themes are found. Inside this folder, I want to create a new one and I will name it WP-devs. You can choose another name, okay? But to follow the course, I recommend you to use this name, okay? If you choose another name for the folder, please type everything in lowercase without special characters or spaces, okay? Inside this new folder, I want to create the two files that are very important to the theme. First, we have index.php and then style.css. Guys, the names have to be exactly like this. By the way, every time the name of a file, of a folder, or of a function can be different, I will warn you in the course, okay? If I don't say anything, you should type the file and functions names exactly the way I type them. Another thing I already told you is that we have to identify this theme within the WordPress admin. So if we jump into the dashboard and head over to the appearance menu, themes, we'll see all the themes that we have already installed in WordPress. So we have the native themes of WordPress and also our WP devs. Notice that this new theme was included here in the list based on the folder we just created. But there is nothing that can be used to recognize this particular theme, unlike the other themes, which are easily identifiable. To solve this problem, we have to create an image file. It must be called screenshot, okay? And the extension in turn should be PNG. To start with, I have already created a screenshot.png for you, which is the same one that we'll make available for you to download with the course. The files will be included among the files available for download inside the folder corresponding to this lesson here, okay? So before you ask me, please download the material available to follow the course, about which I already talked about at the beginning of the course. Find the folder of this lesson here and copy the file. I'm gonna open the theme folder here on the computer. And I'm gonna paste the file here. We'll do the same thing, okay? Okay, now I can see the file here in VS Code 2. But anyway, it's not that difficult to create this file. With any image editing software, even a free one, you can easily create it. It is usually one of the last files we create for the theme because it makes more sense to create it after the theme is ready, for obvious reasons, of course. But just to anticipate things a bit, I already left this file ready for you to use, right? But you should be asking yourself, is there any rule to be followed if you want to create this file. First, the file must have the PNG extension. But Marcelo, can you use the JPEG extension instead? Yes, you can, but it's not recommended by WordPress itself. If you read the documentation, you see that the guys only recommend a file with the PNG extension. So, what can you do? And what can you say about the dimensions of that file? It's 1200 by 900 pixels, despite the fact that the image will show with that dimension in the admin only in certain situations. So the recommendation is to have an image with 1200 by 900 pixels. Now, if everything works out, when we refresh the WordPress admin, we'll see the thumbnail of our theme represented by screenshot.png. Awesome, it's working. Now, when we click here to see more information about the theme, we'll see the image in a much larger size. But soon you realize that there is no additional information about this theme. We only have the folder name here, there is no version information, nor do we have the author theme's name. So how do we make this theme information available in the same way we have for the native WordPress themes? For example, if we choose one of the native themes, we have several additional information about it. What is the kind of magic that makes this happen? Well, it's no magic at all. This information will have to be created in our style.css file. That's simple. So to speed things up a bit, I'll go into the folder of one of the native themes. It could be this one here, style.css file. And I'm going to copy this piece of code here that is inside this first comment block. I'm going to paste it here inside my own style.css. I'm going to delete these lines here. Well, at first glance, this is just a single comment block with more than one line in CSS file. Inside a typical comment block, whatever I put in will be ignored, but not for WordPress. WordPress will use this area to recognize many information related to the theme, such as the theme's name, the theme's author, its description, etc. I would take advantage of the information I copied from the other theme and just replace the values here with those from my theme. The first thing we're going to type in here is the most basic information of all. What is our theme's name? So here under theme name, I'll put WP devs. We can also type in here the theme's web page, theme URI. This information will then display as a link for us. What else? The author's name, author. We may also have a link to the author's page, author URI, and it may be the same information used for the theme URI. Unless you have plans to submit your theme to any marketplace such as WordPress.org or Envado's Theme Forest. In such cases, the two URIs cannot be the same, okay? Since this theme will not be redistributed, I'll leave this address as it is. And what else? A description for the theme. Description. Next is requires at least. Here I pass the WordPress version that the theme needs to run without problems. Let's say it works fine as of WordPress 5.6. Notice that here I must always give the number of a major WordPress version. That is, the version that has only two numbers like 5.6, 5.7, and never, for example, 5.6.1, okay? Tested up to refers to the WordPress version up to which your theme has been tested. Let's say you tested your theme using WordPress version 5.9. That's the information you have to put here, okay? Requires PHP is where you specify the minimum PHP version that is required for your theme to work. Let's say you used a lot of new PHP 8 features in your theme. Certainly, it won't work well under PHP 5.6. So in this case, you would have to put 8.0 here, for example. Version, so this is the first version, so I can just type in here 1.0. Now we got two information about theme licensing, license and license URI. For now, all you need to know is that WordPress is an open source application and everything you create from it should also be open source, preferably using the GPL version 2 license. That doesn't mean that you can't sell a theme which contains this kind of license, right? So let's leave this information as they are. Text domain. This information is extremely important because it will be used throughout the template files and in other files as well, and is used to identify the theme's translation package. For now, you'll be just curious about what it is because I'll only talk about it later on the course. For now, what you need to know is that the text domain will be the same as the theme's folder name, wp-tabs. And finally, the last information here is called tags. What are tags for? Basically, they serve as search facilitators. Let's suppose you want to submit the theme to WordPress.org. Anyone looking for a theme there with certain features can find them very easy since all of them are identified with these tags. For example, let's assume I want to download a theme created for e-commerce websites. If we add the e-commerce tag, we'll be helping the users to find our theme more easily. But pay attention because there are some rules you have to follow here. If this is a theme that you're going to submit to the WordPress repository, that's not our case, all right? But let's just suppose it's your case. You should follow the list of tags available on this page. It's not enough if you just start typing any tag as you wish. For example, if your theme has a tag called left sidebar, your theme should really have a sidebar on the left side. So let's go back to VS Code and let's add a list of tags here, all related to our theme. I'll go ahead and save the file. And now let's see what we got until now in the admin. Okay, we already have the name of our theme here. Let's click here to see more information about it. Look at this. We already have the name of the theme here too, its version, the author's name, and if I mouse over this, you'll see the link to the author's page. We also have our description and the tags too. Cool, isn't it? Nice. So the theme is ready for activation. Now we can go ahead and activate our new theme and preview it on the home page, also known as the front end page. So let's do it. Well, for some reason our theme was already activated. I don't know why, but okay, it's already activated then. Okay, but what happens when we decide to visit the front end? Well, of course it will be empty because our index.php file is also empty. Anyway, let's do a little test in our index.php to see if it's really working. Let's create a basic HTML structure inside this file. Let's just type an exclamation mark and hit the tab key. By the way, I forgot to mention that VS Code already comes with a feature called Emmet. Emmet is a tool that can help you write code faster. Notice, for example, that I only need to type the exclamation mark and I already have a preview of the result I will get. The software kind of spits out this large chunk of HTML code on the screen. That's fantastic, guys. Emmet can do much more than that. During the course, you see me using some of its abbreviations to speed up coding. Here in the course, I won't explain how it works in detail, but if you don't know yet, I recommend that you watch a quick tutorial on how to use it. On YouTube alone, there are many good tutorials, okay? So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna change to information. I'm gonna add a title to the page. And also a new paragraph. Now I'm gonna save it here and go back to the home page. Notice here that the browser is already showing the page title. The content of the paragraph is also being displayed here, and that shows that our file is really working. So we already have our first WordPress theme available within the admin, activated and identified. We also have a working index.php file. That means we have created our first WordPress theme. But of course, we will not stop here. In our next lesson, we're gonna learn how to make the index.php file much more flexible. I'll wait for you guys in the next lesson. Hello guys, welcome to one more lesson. In this lesson, we are going to talk about the 3 basic building blocks of a WordPress theme. We see that we only need 3 blocks to build a theme: a header, a dynamic content area, and a footer. The dynamic area at first will be represented by the index.php file, but as you remember, this file is used as the default theme template. We also have different template files used for static pages, for viewing posts, etc. But let's focus first on the index.php file. First, let's open up our prototype, our ready-made theme. You may notice that it contains this region here, a region that is going to be the same for all pages, which goes from this bar here with the logo and the search box to the end of the menu. If I open up one of the inner pages, you see that this region here never changes. It also has a dynamic content region that goes from this hero to the end of this list of posts. And then there is a footer that's going to be displayed on every page of the theme as well. This dynamic region at the beginning will be determined by the index.php file, but when we open a post, we'll make arrangements for WordPress to use a different template file. But first things first. In the last lesson, we created the index.php file, but it was created in a rather elementary way. It has only one paragraph and a title tag, only that. But if you can remember from another lesson, I told you that a home page is very different from a contact page, an about us page, a services page, and so on. That's why we're gonna make this layout more dynamic. In order for this to work, let's split this layout into 3 parts. To begin with, let's create our basic HTML structure, all based on the ready-made theme design you see here. Let's head over to VS Code. Open up index.php, and I'm going to leave this paragraph here just as a reference for us, okay? Before we do that, let's start with some changes to the HTML and head tags. In WordPress, everything needs to be dynamic. 2 pieces of information that needs to be flexible are the site's language and the site's character set. These are defined by the site user in the WordPress admin and cannot be left hard-coded. For the language, I take this snippet here, open the PHP tag, and call the language attributes function. Now here for the char set, I take out this information here, I open the PHP tag, and in here I call a function named block_info. And I pass a parameter called charSet. Later, if you're interested, you can look for more information about this block_info function. It is very versatile and you can do a lot of things with it. To wrap up, I will remove the title tag here. But then you must be thinking, this guy is totally crazy. The title tag is one of the most important, if not the most important, for the correct indexing of a site by search engines. Well, let me explain then. Or else you think I'm kind of crazy. Since version 4.1, WordPress recommends that this tag is included not in the head portion but through the Functions.php file using theme support. We haven't talked about this Functions.php file in the course yet, but soon we will, okay? Okay, and as for other meta tags like description, author, keywords, well, you're not going to include these other meta tags in our theme. To understand why, we have to visit the WordPress codex, right? Here on this page, whose link I will make available to you, of course, the WordPress team explains that over the years, many of these meta tags no longer make sense. Like, for example, the keywords meta tag, which Google no longer uses because many people abused it. Down here, they have a phrase that I think is great to explain this. Without a doubt, content is the biggest contributor to search engine page ranking. So if you want to raise your rankings, make sure you have quality content. Okay, but if you still want to use some of these meta tags, like the description, for example, well, on this page, they explain how to do it. I'm not going to include it here because even the native WordPress themes no longer use these meta tags. If you think I'm crazy again, you can see by yourself. Well, let's start off with the body tag. Fortunately, WordPress gives us a very useful function that can be used inside the body tag. It helps us identify which page we are working on within the theme. We can use this artifice to better style our theme. This function is called body_class. It basically returns the classes related to the page we are viewing. For example, when we visit the home page, it prints out a home class inside the body tag. Hence, we can style a page that has a home class in a different way. But you will understand this better as we move along the course, okay? We'll see this in detail. Let's start by creating a div here with the page ID and the site class. For now, let's start by creating the HTML structure of the site's header. So inside the header, according to our layout, we have a bar at the top where the logo and the search box are located. So let's create a section that will have the top-bar class. Inside this top bar, we have two other areas. We will use two divs for these two areas. The first one on the left side reserved for the logo, and another one on the right side that will be named search box. Let me come back here to our prototype. Do you see what I'm doing here? I'm translating this part of the layout here into HTML. I called it top bar in the HTML structure. Inside it, I created the structure for these two other areas. On the left side, an area for the logo, and on the right side, a search area. We are creating, for now, only the basic markup of the site. It will be only this to start with. Now, to continue on, let's go ahead and create the menu area as a section HTML element, still within the header area. Let's call it menu-area. Inside the section, we're going to have a nav. The class will be main-menu. And that's all for the header. This whole area we're creating will repeat on every single page. So let's go ahead and create our dynamic area now. It will start with a div with the content ID, site-content class. Then another div with ID primary and class content-area. Inside this area, we'll have many other areas. According to the layout, we'll have here our main area, which should stay inside a main tag. I can give it an ID of main and a site-main class. In here, we're gonna have 3 sections. The first one is gonna have the hero class, which is for the hero element at the top of the home page. The second one is gonna have the services class. And the last one, the home-blog class for a list of posts from the site. And lastly, outside of all these divs, we're going to add a footer tag for our themes footer. The class will be site-footer. We have the index.php finally ready. But again, I must tell you that if you only have the index.php file created that way, our theme will be pretty simple. So let's do different. My idea is to break this index.php into 3 blocks. The first one will contain an area that will be always dynamic. Its content will change depending on the page visited. For example, on a home page, the page will have all these elements that we added here in the index. However, on a blog page, it won't have the hero, the services area, and the same list of posts that we'll see on the home page. On the other hand, the other 2 areas from here up and from the footer down will always repeat for every single page. Here's what I'm gonna do. I will add some HTML comments here just to outline the areas that I have just told you about. To finish, I will be adding some text here inside each section, just to have a reference of what I'm building here. This will be our 3 building blocks. But we're gonna stop here for now because in the next lesson, we're gonna continue with the explanation showing you how we can split these blocks into 3 different files. One for the header, one for the dynamic part, and a third for the footer. So until then, and I see you in the next lesson. Hey, what's going on, guys? In this lesson, we'll go ahead and keep creating our basic building blocks for the WordPress theme. So picking up where we left off in the last lesson, I'm going to start by selecting the region that will become later on the theme header. This selection will have to go from the beginning of the HTML to the end of the header tag. This part of the code is going to be repeated on every page. So let's cut out this selection, save the file, and create a new one. The name of this new file is going to be header.php. Marcelo, does the name of this file have to be header.php? Yeah, it must be header.php, and later on you'll understand why. Now you need to paste everything you just copied in there. And now we have our header that will repeat at the top for all pages of our theme. Let's go back to index.php. And now the new selection will go from the footer tag to the end of the file. Let's select and cut again. And let's create another file called footer.php. What is left now will correspond to our index file, one of the dynamic parts of our theme. Well, what happens if you open the homepage right now? So let's reload the site's front end then. Now, as you can see, I only have one part of the site showing up, starting with the hero and ending with the blog. Let's do one more thing. Let's inspect this page. I want to show you guys something else. I told you that the body class function would load some classes inside the body tag. Hey Marcelo, I think it didn't work, you may say. Where are all those classes? And I say to you, everyone who has a basic understanding of PHP knows that we can load parts of a PHP file with the help of both the include or require commands. WordPress has some functions similar to these, but a bit different. There are very specific WordPress functions that can load the header and the footer. So let's go back to the code in the index.php file. Our index file will load the header from here up and the footer from here down. So we'll have to load them here and here. But how we will do that? Alright, we'll be using two basic WordPress functions that are get_header . This function loads a file that is named header.php, and now you understand why this file must be called header.php. And the other function, can you imagine what it's called? Get_footer. Let's see if all this works. So let's go back to the browser and refresh the homepage. And here it is. Now our full content is showing up. And if we inspect the page, as I told you, that function in the body finally worked. Look here, home, blog, and also some other classes that WordPress automatically adds for us. So the homepage has these classes here. We could use CSS and create a specific rule for all the H2 paragraphs which belongs to the homepage, for example. They will be different from those on the inner pages of the theme. This is just a very simple example. We can make even more complex things. By the way, if you open the theme's CSS, you see that I did some of that. So Marcelo, does it mean that if I download a theme from the internet, let's say a pure HTML theme, not created for WordPress, or that template I created myself, also in pure HTML, if I split them the way you just taught, it will work? Of course it will work. But first you have to be aware of a couple of things. For example, you have to create a new folder, create a new style.css file with the rules I explained in the previous lessons, and split the template index file into 3. So that's it. In the next lesson, we're gonna learn how to load style sheets within WordPress the right way. See you then. Happy coding. What's up guys? In this lesson we'll start learning about one of the most important files of a WordPress theme, the file called Functions.php. The main idea of this lesson is to teach you how to load any style sheet into your theme, and in the right way, which is more important. This lesson is a bit lengthy, but once you understand the process described here, you'll be able to easily replicate it as many times as you need. Everything I say here is extremely important, so hang in there. In the last lesson, we just started this layout creation work, breaking our index into 3 chunks. We created the header, our footer, and filled our dynamic area with the functions that call the footer and the header. So let's go to today's work. Typically, to call style sheet in pure HTML, we'll just create a CSS folder and organize our files inside it. Then we just call this file right there in the head tag. For our WordPress theme, the picture is just a little different. We never include style sheets directly. There's a lot of explanations for that, but I'm not going to stop now to explain why, since that would make us lose our chain of thoughts. Well, in order to write our CSS, we're going to use that style.css file that we created in the beginning of the course. We also have the possibility to create a separate file. That's how I used to do in the past. But lately, I've been preferring to use only the base CSS file to write all my CSS. Okay, but if I'm not going to call the CSS file directly here inside the head tag, how will WordPress know that this file exists? Is it some kind of magic? Well, not necessarily. The most appropriate way to do this is to create a file called Functions.php within our theme. If you look at other themes like 2021, for example, it has a Functions.php file too. If you open this file up, you see that it has several functions. The functions.php file acts as a kind of plugin. But unlike plugins which apply to the site as a whole, I mean, it affects all the themes at once, functions.php only applies to the theme that is currently active. So anything I write inside this functions.php when 2021 is active will only apply to the 2021 theme. In the same way, the functions.php we're going to create will only apply to the theme in this WP devs folder. And what does this functions.php have? What is its function? Well, it can contain some settings for featured images, our menu functions, various other types of support that the theme can add, the sidebars we will create, like here for example, the lines that will add our style sheets, our scripts, and we can also create our specific functions and load them into WordPress. We're going to use this file a lot during the theme configuration, as you see. So let's go. Let's create our own file to load our style sheet. But before we talk about this function that makes this magic happen, I'll try to explain more or less what is the dynamics of what's going to happen in this class. Well, the loading process of a WordPress site is a bit different from most sites. This loading process is followed by several moments of execution. WordPress has a word for those moments. They are called hooks. Some of these hooks are defined inside the WP settings file. If you open this file and search for the term do_action, we'll find several of these hooks. For example, setup theme is a hook fired before the theme is loaded. There are others like after setup theme, init, WP loaded. Anyway, each one is used for one thing. The hook that interests us in this lesson is WP enqueue scripts. This hook is inside the script loader.php file. We find this file being included here. So here it is. And then opening it right where it's been specified. We have the WP enqueue scripts hook. And this guy here will be in charge of loading our style sheets into WordPress. So how does it work in practice? We simply write a function and have WordPress fire this function on this hook. Once the function is triggered, our style sheets are associated with the theme. It's like this function hangs on this hook, so to speak. This is what WordPress calls enqueuing. So we always enqueue the style sheets and scripts inside WordPress. That is, we put them in a queue, in an order. It seems a complicated thing, but it's not. Let's understand this better in practice now. Let's create a new file in VS Code with the name Functions.php. The file has to be created inside the folder WP devs, right? Before a doubt arises, yes, the file has to be called Functions.php. Don't forget the letter S at the end of the name, okay? Let's start the file with the opening PHP tag. But notice that I will just open the tag, but we won't close it. In all files that contain only plain PHP, you don't need to close the tag. This prevents you from having errors like headers already sent coming up on the front end. Now inside the file, let's create a PHP function. A PHP function, as you know, starts with the word function, followed by the name of the function. The name of our function will be WP devs _load _scripts. I would like to point something out to you. It's very important that we put the name of the theme as a prefix in almost all the code. Are you going to create a function? Pass the name of the theme as a prefix. Are you going to create a menu? So include the theme name together. Are you going to create a special image size? Also put the name of the theme first. That prevents any feature of your theme from getting confused with another theme or with some of WordPress, especially function names, all right? Okay, now the WordPress function that will make our style sheets enqueued, loaded, is the WP enqueue style. The word enqueue means put in a queue, if you get it right. When this function is read, it will load our CSS files one underneath the other in a queue, and we'll be able to see that later in the source code of the page. For this function to do something, we'll have to pass some parameters to it. The first one is the handle. What will be the handle? The identifier of the file in the queue. Let's give it the WP devs-style handle. It can be any name, okay? As long as you don't repeat these names, don't add spaces or special characters, that's fine. The second parameter is what invokes the path to our file. There are several ways to get the path to a file that is located inside the folder of your theme. The best known and the most used is getTemplateDirectory URI. This function returns the URI to the theme folder, something like you're seeing right here on the screen. There's also one function called getTemplateDirectory, which returns only the absolute path of the folder, and it's very useful in some occasions. And there's another one called getStylesheetURI, which returns the absolute path to the theme's main stylesheet file, style.css. In this case, that's what we need. If you chose to write your CSS to a separate file, let's suppose you had created a folder called CSS and had a file called template.css inside it. To call this file, you would have to use the other function, right? getTemplateDirectory-URI, which will then identify for you the URI to the WP devs folder. We'll do this later in the course and you understand better in practice. But in our case, we don't need to do all this if it's just to find the main file, okay? Let's just use getStylesheetURI. The third argument tells if our stylesheet has any dependency on another file. That is, if there's any other stylesheet that needs to be loaded before our style.css. That is, if it's dependent on some other file. If it exists, we need to inform the handle of this file inside an array. For example, if there's a style sheet called full.css, we would pass its handle inside the array, full, if that's the handle it's using. Since we don't have any dependency, we can leave only the array empty. Another argument that the function needs is the version. This argument is not required, okay? We can type, for example, 1.0, which would be the version of our style sheet. The version text will be concatenated with the file name, and then we can see the version number in the source code. This argument accepts a string, as we did here, or a Boolean value, true or false, or the value null. This parameter is there for caching reasons, so if you don't want to develop the theme with the browser cache in the way, there are some workarounds you can apply to bypass it. We will look at some of those solutions in the next lessons. Another valid option is to inform the theme's version number. We can do that by calling the function wp-getTheme, the way you see it there on the screen. The last parameter has to do with what kind of media this CSS file refers to. It can be print, screen, or all. All would be related to all types of media, and it's the value that is generally used. Okay, fine, but it's not enough to declare the function. First, we have to add this function to an action, assigning it to a hook. So we are going to associate our wp-devs-load-scripts function to a hook called wp-enqueueScripts, the one we talked about earlier in the lesson. To attach the hook to the function, we're going to use another WordPress function called add_action. We'll see this function used many times in WordPress. First, we'll specify the name of the action hook. which in our case will be WP Enqueue scripts. And then the function that will be executed, which is the one we just created. So what's going on here? We have created our WP devs load script function. Inside it, we have called the function that prints the address of our style sheet, style.css. It doesn't have any dependency. Its version is 1.0 and is relative to all types of media. The add action function adds an action within the WordPress execution. Then the WordPress page will load, and as soon as it loads, we have several hooks available. One of those hooks is called WP Enqueue scripts. We take advantage of this hook and make a function run on it called WP load scripts, which in turn calls our style sheet. Well, that's quite a gear, isn't it? Well, this lesson is getting pretty lengthy. That's why I'm gonna divide this explanation into two parts. In the next lesson, let's see if all this is working. And more, let's learn a few tricks to eliminate caching problems related to the CSS files. Until then. Hey guys, let's continue from where we left off. We've learned how to call the style sheet the right way, but there are still a few details to make it work quite properly. None of this will be useful if you don't call inside our header.php a function named wp-head. It has to be placed before the head tag ends. It is by means of this function that everything that is enqueued will be included in the head tag of the theme. So let's open up the PHP tag and type in here wp_head. Without this function, no script will work, no style sheet will load, including those used by plugins in WordPress. So let's check our main page out and see if everything is working. Let's refresh the page. If we inspect the code, let's see if our style sheet is on the list here. Yeah, look at that. Here it is, style.css, with its handle, the path, the version 1.0 we defined, the media type. Now we can finally test our style sheet out. Let's create a rule for our top bar. Just for testing purposes, let's just set the red color and a height for that bar. Let's take a look, refreshing the page. Look at this, it worked perfectly. But before I finish this lesson, I'm gonna give a very valuable tip to you that is starting now in the web development world. One of the most frequently asked questions in my course is the following. Hey teacher, I'm making changes here in my CSS file, but no changes are coming up. Well, that's not a WordPress thing, but it's simply how the browser cache behaves. Caching is a mechanism that speeds up the loading of the page for your visitor. It saves a version of your site files so that the visitor doesn't have to download them every time they open your site. But it's a terrible thing to develop a website with the cache on. Over the past few years, I've tried several methods to work without the cache in the way, and I'm going to show you now the way that works the most for me. What we're going to do is trick the browser and make it think that the CSS file has changed and that it needs to download an updated version of the file. This will happen every time we save the file. Do you see this version number here in the source code? It has a question mark followed by the term ver equals sign and the version number that we have indicated. Every time we save, we'll generate a different version number based on the date the file was saved, which will always be different. To do this, let's change this string here to a PHP function called filemtime. And inside it, we'll pass the path to the style sheet file. So the function will return the file modification date as its version, right? However, an important detail is that you cannot pass the getStyleSheetURI function here because it won't work. We're going to pass the function getTemplateDirectory that will return the absolute path of our theme folder and concatenate this value with the file name. Don't forget the /. Now let's save. Let's change the color of the top bar to blue. And let's look at the updated source code again. Here's where something else appears instead of the version of the file. There are several numbers here that correspond to the Unix timestamp of the moment the file was changed. Now, when we refresh the front end, so the color is blue. Let's change that over to red again. Here in the source code, the numbers have changed. And the bar has changed its color to red as well. Now, a professional tip for you people. Only use this method here while developing the theme. After you've finished all the CSS changes and have the theme ready for delivery, remove it here and just put back the theme's version number, preferably using the WP get theme function that I talked about in the previous lesson. The visitors of all the websites that use your theme will thank you for this. Don't forget that, right? We'll do that at the end of the course. Well, that was all for this lesson. Don't miss the next one. See you there. Well folks, now that you have seen how to add style sheets the right way using Functions.php, let's do one more exercise. In this lesson, we are going to include Google Fonts in our theme, also using the WP Enqueue style function. Our theme is going to work with one of the fonts from the Google repository called Poppins. Before I do that, I just need to make a correction here in the header.php file. So I forgot to close the body tag. That's why you're seeing this paragraph underlined in red. I didn't even notice it because the browser ended up interpreting the HTML correctly, despite my typo. So please correct it in your code, okay? Let's get back to today's subject. Let's see how to add the Google font we're going to use in our theme. To do this is quite easy. We go to Google Fonts. Now the steps I'm going to show you here might be a little bit different depending on when you're watching this video, because from time to time Google changes the page layout, but basically the steps for adding the fonts remains the same, okay? In case this process changes in a very significant way, I will leave a reference link in the extra materials with some updated tutorials, okay? First, let's search for the font. You're under Search Fonts. I search for Poppins. I click on the card related to the font, and you see that most fonts have more than one style, like this one. Look at the number of styles. But the more styles we add, the heavier our theme can get, okay? In this case, I only want 2 styles for my theme, regular and bold, which would be this style here with weight 400 and this other with weight 700. Okay, styles chosen. Now the most important information I need is this link here. So I'll copy the link then. Now let's go to Functions.php. And on the line just below, I will again call the WP Enqueue style. The handle is going to be Google-fonts. And now in the second parameter, there is a little difference compared to the previous examples. In the past examples, we were indicating files that are inside the actual theme directory. So we used either getStyleSheet directory or getTemplateDirectory-URI to indicate either the direct path to the theme's style.css file or the path to the themes directory. Now let's do it differently. Since we're not going to have any file, we can pass the URL directly as a second parameter, which is the URL we just copied. As for the other parameters, we can pass the third one as an empty array too. The fourth parameter, the one of the version, I'll pass as null this time. Remember, I explained in another video that the version value can be a string or a boolean or null. We already used strings in the other examples. Now, if you use a boolean value, for example, false, the version value will be the same as the installed version of WordPress. If you pass null, no version will be added. Now, the last argument, I can skip it because it is optional and is set to all by default. That's basically what you have to do. Now, to use the font, just follow the instructions on the Google Fonts page. Very easy. That's what I did in the theme CSS file. If you open the file, you see a line that declares the font used in the theme according to the instructions from Google Fonts. By the way, in the next lesson, I will give you a better explanation of what is inside this CSS file. One more question you may be asking yourself. How can I work with more than one font? It's very easy, guys. Just choose the font, the same way I showed you here, and copy the new URL, okay? Because it will generate a new URL for you. But there's an important detail. You'll only be able to work with more than one font if the style sheet version is set to null, the way we did here, okay? Another option is to make a separate call to WP Enqueue style for each of the fonts you want to work with. As for adding the Google font itself, there are two other possibilities. The first is to call the font using links or using an @import, as you are seeing here on the Google Fonts page. Well, maybe you have one more question. So why do I have to use Functions.php and all these functions in order to add the CSS? Well, I think the explanation I made about all the function parameter is probably enough. I mean, you have access to the features like version control, dependency control. That's why you should always add style sheets using the WordPress way, okay? Not to mention other advantages like the possibility to just register a file to use it later using the WP register style function. We'll talk about it at the end of the course, but I recommend you to have a look at it. And also the possibility to do the opposite, unregister CSS files using WP deregister style. Things that you can only do by sticking to the WordPress way of doing things. I will leave a very interesting explanation on the subject in the extra material of this lesson. It's a discussion about a function we will see later, the WP Enqueue script function, but it will help you understand why you should be using the WordPress functions only. Before I finish this lesson, as I mentioned at the beginning, there have been some changes in the way fonts are added to WordPress themes. Since early 2022, WordPress has discouraged developers from using Google links directly in the theme. That's because there was a court case in Germany that fined the owner of a WordPress site just because the site was offering Google fonts through those links. The problem has to do with the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation. I will leave an article explaining the case for those of you who are curious to know more. If you're taking this course here and you're considering making your theme available on WordPress.org, you should know that you will have to comply with this new rule now if you want your theme to pass the revision process, okay? In other words, don't make Google Fonts available using the links anymore. To help you out, I will link to a very detailed post explaining how to manually add Google Fonts in WordPress themes. If you're interested, I can record a specific video lesson explaining the process, but the post in the link is very easy to follow. So that's it, folks. See you in the next lesson. What's up, guys? Well, we know that the theme CSS file is working, so let's put some real content inside it. In this lesson, I will make all the CSS of our theme available to you. Remember I said in one of the first lessons, a lesson called Valuable Tips, that I advised you not to skip it. I said that the focus here is not CSS and that in this course I would explain very little about CSS and focus more on WordPress. Only a few times I will dive into the CSS file with you and explain some details about how I did it to create one or another area of the theme. this is to save time, okay? If I decided to write all the CSS together with you, you would have twice as many lessons in this course. So as I already had the theme prototype ready, because I spent some weeks putting this prototype together exclusively for this course here, so that's why I have all the CSS ready. So here in the CSS file, I'm gonna make it available and paste in all the CSS of the theme now. And save it here. Now in the front end, we have some changes. Basically the colors have changed here. As the course goes on, all the pieces will be falling into place here, okay? Well, to avoid people saying that I didn't even show the CSS file in the course, let's see what we got. It's pretty simple stuff, okay? If you're taking this course, you should be used to seeing this, and you should already know how to deal with everything that is in here, since it is even a prerequisite of the course. Basically, the file is divided in two parts. The first part is made up of some CSS rules to normalize the HTML elements across all browsers. This is pretty common stuff. In this case, I decided to work with normalize.css, but you can choose another solution, or you can choose some CSS reset if you prefer, okay, instead of a normalize. Or you can also create your own normalize or reset rules if you prefer. Usually people just reset the margins and padding of some elements and add box sizing as border box to the universal selector. This is important to make your theme look consistent across all browsers, alright? And right below, we have the CSS rules specific to our theme. It's all pretty standard stuff. To organize the colors and measurements, I used some CSS variables, which you see in the rest of the file. I declared some general rules. I defined the rules of the container class that I will use in all template files to center the site's content. This is a little bit based on Bootstrap, okay? For those of you who are familiar with it. By the way, for those of you who followed the previous version of this course, the thing that changed the most here was that I stopped using Bootstrap and now I'm using pure CSS with a little bit of Flexbox and Grid CSS, and this is so I don't have to depend on Bootstrap versions, because with each version the name of one or another class changes and the students get a little confused. It's for the same reason that I also decided not to use plugins in this course. Well, right below we have the specific sections for the theme's homepage template, the top bar with its elements. Here and in the most of the sections I used Flexbox to make everything responsive, and media queries. Here I have all the menu rules, both desktop and responsive, the hero section, services, the post list. Here I used CSS Grid to make that region responsive. The footer. And here are all the elements of the theme's inner pages: blog, archive, and search templates. Comments and pagination. Of course, the theme is not 100% styled, okay? In the course, you'll notice one thing or another that needs to be improved in terms of appearance. I didn't worry about making the theme look 100% perfect. This is not the intention of this course. The goal here is not to focus on the design, but in learning how a WordPress theme works. And for this, CSS is an accessory, not the main thing. If you want, later on you can take over the theme yourself and make the CSS changes you want. Please bear in mind that I'm just giving you a base, okay? But if you have questions regarding CSS, please ask me. I don't want you to have any doubts, okay? So that's it for this lesson. Next time we'll talk about a new subject. See you there. Hello guys, and welcome to one more lesson. In the last lesson we started enqueuing our style sheet using the WP enqueue style function inside the Functions.php file. In this lesson we're going to learn how to enqueue our scripts. In this course project we're going to add a JavaScript file that will be responsible for controlling the behavior of the theme's responsive menu, so that the explanation is as clear as possible and that we continue following our line of reasoning. We'll first be adding one of the files in this lesson, even though it will be empty for now. We're going to use a very similar function to the one we used in the last lesson, WP enqueue style. This time it's called WP enqueue script. That's all. Look, pay close attention to the name, okay? The function name doesn't have the letter S. What does have it is the name of the hook right below. There are many students who misspell this and end up seeing some memory errors on the screen because WordPress doesn't warn them that the function name is wrong. I don't know why, but WordPress just makes the site output a message related to insufficient memory. I have no idea why that is, so please spell the names correctly, okay? Now, what are some of the parameters it requires? The first parameter is the file handle. Let's name this handle dropdown. The second parameter is also the path in which the file can be found. To use the second parameter, I call the function getTemplateDirectory URI. As you remember, it prints the URI to the theme folder, that is the page identifier that leads to the theme directory. This function is different from the one we used before, which has no URI in the name. The other function was used as a parameter to get the modification date of the style.css file. In that case, we couldn't use the function that ends with URI, okay, because the file mtime function won't accept it. Well, what is missing now is to pass the name of the file that has to be called. For this, I concatenate with the rest of the file path. This file will be inside a folder called JS, and its name will be dropdown.js. By the way, I'll be creating the folder and the file empty for now. Don't forget this / at the beginning of the string. Okay, the third parameter is that of the dependency. In our case, we will again pass an empty array because our file has no dependencies. But let's think of a case where this would be necessary. For example, let's say you want to use Bootstrap version 4 in your theme. That Bootstrap version still depends on jQuery. Since version 5, this is no longer the case, but version 4 still needs jQuery to work. That is, it doesn't work if jQuery hasn't been loaded before it. To indicate this, we would pass the jQuery string inside the array. The fourth parameter is that of the version. I can pass 1.0. Now the last parameter is very important. It indicates if we want to add our JavaScript file to the footer before closing the body tag or inside the head tag. This is very interesting because you can move some files to the bottom of the page, which can improve a little bit the performance of the site, since the whole page will be able to be loaded without waiting for the JavaScript file. To do this, the value of the argument will be true. By default, the value of this parameter is false. Let's set the value to true here. You just shouldn't do that when it hurts the normal functioning of the theme, because some JavaScript files cannot be left at the bottom of the page, like jQuery, for example. That's it. Now my JavaScript file has also been added to the queue. We can now check if it has actually been added. But there's one small detail. If you search for the JavaScript file now, you won't find it. That's because, well, remember the WP head function we used in the last lesson? Yeah, there is a counterpart of it to be used in the footer as well. And who said it's called WP footer got it right. Let's open the footer.php file and add this function before closing the body tag. Looking for the JavaScript file, we see that it's been loaded at the end of the file as we defined. Let's just do a quick test, calling the console log on the JavaScript file. Now it looks like the file is working too. Perfect. Well, that's it for this lesson. See you in the next lesson. So are you guys enjoying learning? I hope so. Well, but this is just the beginning. There's much more in the full course. There are about 70 lessons with content that you won't find anywhere else. And the best of all is that you have a 30-day guarantee and my unique support. Got any questions? I'll be there to help you. So what you're waiting for? There are already more than 25,000 students in my courses and a lot of people who are following a promising career working with WordPress. So why don't you join us? Jumpstart your career, enroll today using the discount coupon link in the video description. That's it, see you there in the course.